Sarah Blackmore, and I'm a registered clinical counselor living and working in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I support individuals in my private practice, North Talk, where I offer both in-person and virtual counseling services for the general public, as well as clinical consultation and supervision for counselors. Welcome back to Navigating Your Mental Health Compass video series. This is an 8-part video series that provides evidence-based information to help you build greater self-awareness, learn effective strategies to better your mental health, and move beyond obstacles to live a life with meaning and purpose. If you haven't already, please go back and watch the first episode in this series, Discovering Your Mental Health Compass, where I give an overview of acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, which is the psychological modality that provides the framework for this video series. ACT is designed to help individuals improve their mental well-being by promoting psychological flexibility, which is the ability to adapt to various situations, change behaviors, and pursue values-based actions, even in the presence of challenging thoughts and emotions. That all sounds a bit jargony, don't worry. We're going to break down all the ACT concepts throughout this whole video series, with each episode focusing on one of the 6 core principles of ACT. In this episode, I'm going to focus on one of the core principles known as the present moment, which is also the title of this episode, a concept you may know as mindfulness. Okay, I know what you may be thinking. Oh no, not mindfulness. I've heard so much about mindfulness and I'm over it. Or I've tried practicing mindfulness and it doesn't work for me. Or maybe there's no way I'm going to focus on my breathing for 5 minutes. I get it. Trust me. As someone who's type A and is used to constantly multitasking, I know all too well the challenges associated with focusing on one thing at a time. But I'm going to ask you to bear with me here. I find that most times people are skeptical about practicing present moment awareness or mindfulness because they don't actually understand why it's helpful and what it does. In my experience, once the concept of mindfulness is understood, there tends to be more willingness to give it a go. Don't get me wrong, I'm not in the business of selling you something you don't want to buy. My motto is, take what works for you and leave what doesn't. And that applies to the information and practices I cover in this video series. However, with that said, I do invite you to approach these concepts and practices with curiosity and a willingness to give them a try, at least a few times, and see how they go for you. In this episode of Navigating Your Mental Health Compass, I'm going to break down what mindfulness is and how it can be helpful. We'll end with a guided mindfulness practice so that you can get a sense of one way you can practice this coping strategy. If you'll recall from episode 1, this video series uses the metaphor of a compass. The compass is a visual representation that illustrates how your values can serve as a guiding compass in your life. Your values represent the north direction, and the compass needle represents being in the present moment. In ACT, mindfulness and present moment awareness are crucial. The needle reminds you to stay focused on the here and now, as that's where you make choices and take actions that align with your values. We'll return to this metaphor at the end of the video. For now, let's start with where the concept of mindfulness came from. Mindfulness is an ancient concept found in a wide range of spiritual and religious traditions, including Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, most martial arts, and yoga. In the early 20th century, Western scholars and psychologists began to show interest in mindfulness practices as they explored Eastern philosophies and meditation techniques. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the founder of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, also known as MBSR, is often recognized as bridging mindfulness from its Eastern roots to Western audiences in a secular and more therapeutic context. More and more, Western psychology has recognized the many benefits of mindfulness, and it has now become an empirically supported intervention. There are different ways to define mindfulness, but I find Jon Kabat-Zinn's 4-pillar model helpful in making this somewhat abstract concept more tangible. Jon Kabat-Zinn and many others define mindfulness as paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. Let's break down these concepts further, starting with the first pillar, paying attention. Paying attention. This means deliberately focusing on what is happening both internally, your thoughts, emotions, and physical body sensations, and externally, your environment. What do you hear, see, smell, taste, and physically feel? It's about being fully present in whatever you're doing, whether it's eating, walking, working, or simply sitting quietly. Second pillar, on purpose, demonstrates that mindfulness requires intentionality. Contrary to some misconceptions, mindfulness is not a passive state. On purpose means that you consciously choose and put effort into cultivating mindfulness. It's a deliberate decision to be present and attentive. This intentionality distinguishes mindfulness from simply letting your mind wander or being lost in thought. In the present moment. This third pillar emphasizes the importance of being in the here and now. Mindfulness involves letting go of preoccupation with the past or worries about the future. It's about fully inhabiting the present moment as it is without getting caught up in regrets or anxieties. This focus on the present moment is a key aspect of mindfulness that helps reduce unnecessary stress and suffering. Non-judgmentally. This fourth pillar of mindfulness highlights the non-judgmental aspect of awareness. It means observing your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without evaluating them as good or bad or right or wrong. Instead of reacting with criticism or attachment, you adopt an attitude of acceptance and curiosity. This non-judgmental stance allows you to develop a more compassionate relationship with your own experience. This four-pillar approach emphasizes that mindfulness is about intentionally paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It involves being fully engaged in your experience, no matter how mundane or challenging they may be, and observing your experience with an open and accepting attitude. What I like about this definition of mindfulness is that it provides a framework for cultivating mindfulness in everyday life. Russ Harris, an Australian medical doctor and prominent and influential figure in the field of acceptance and commitment therapy, further defines mindfulness from an ACT framework as a process of awareness, not thinking. Mindfulness involves paying attention to our experience in the moment as opposed to being caught up in thoughts. Furthermore, mindfulness involves a particular attitude, one of openness and curiosity. Even if our experience in the moment is difficult, painful, or unpleasant, we can be open to and curious about it instead of running from it or fighting with it. Finally, mindfulness involves flexibility of attention, the ability to consciously direct, broaden, or focus attention in on a different aspect of our experience. I often say to clients that mindfulness is something that sounds easy, paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. But it's actually very difficult given how our evolved brains are capable of multitasking to meet the demands of the productivity culture that we live in. If you're someone who experiences anxiety, you're most likely very familiar with future-focused thinking, imagining the worst-case scenarios or planning out every last detail to help you feel in control of the situation. This means that you're disconnected from the present moment and wrapped up in an anticipated future. This isn't to say that all future-focused thinking is bad or unproductive or even a sign of anxiety, but rather that sometimes we get too wrapped up in future-focused thinking that we're disconnected from the present moment and therefore not in touch with what would serve us best in the here and now. Alternatively, some of us can spend a lot of time reflecting, ruminating, or being trapped by our past experiences and memories. A lot of us are probably familiar with replaying embarrassing moments from our past over and over again, wondering how they could have been avoided. Again, this is a completely normal process for humans to engage in as social beings. However, sometimes we can end up spending too much time reliving our past, to the point that it starts to negatively impact our present moment or even how we make decisions about our future. Mindfulness challenges us to be present in our experience, no matter what is going on, even if it feels difficult. There are many benefits to being truly present in our experience, including emotion regulation. Mindfulness helps us become more aware of our emotions. It allows for a helpful relationship with emotions by providing the space to observe them without immediate reaction, which can lead to more balanced emotional responses. Improved mental clarity. Mindfulness enhances mental clarity and concentration by helping individuals train their brain to be in the present moment, which in turn leads to better attunement of our needs and decision-making. Enhanced self-awareness. Mindfulness cultivates self-awareness by encouraging us to observe our thoughts, emotions, and physical body sensations. This increased self-awareness can lead to personal growth, greater insight into one's behaviors and thought patterns, and a deeper understanding of oneself. Enhanced problem solving. By approaching difficulties with a non-reactive mind, we can engage more in effective problem solving. Mindfulness helps us to see situations from different perspectives and consider creative solutions. Improved relationships. Mindfulness can enhance interpersonal relationships by helping us be active listeners, deepen empathy, and engage in more effective communication. Mindfulness helps to reduce impulsivity and reactivity in interactions with others, resulting in less conflict. Reduce suffering. Mindfulness is often associated with reducing suffering by changing our relationship with pain, both physical and emotional. It may seem counterintuitive, but research has shown that if we can actually connect to our experience of pain as it is, without over-identifying with it, we can increase our capacity to cope. Values alignment. Mindfulness can help us clarify our values and align our actions with our values, which can help lead us to a more meaningful and purposeful life. So even though it may seem counterintuitive to actively be present when we're currently experiencing something difficult, as you can see, there are many benefits to mindfulness as a coping strategy. Mindfulness is truly multifaceted and can vary depending on your goals and your experiences. Mindfulness is a way for us to connect with ourselves and appreciate the fullness of each moment of life. We can use it to improve our self-knowledge and connect deeply with others. As Russ Harris puts it, mindfulness is the action of living consciously, a way to enhance psychological resilience and increase life satisfaction. So let's check in. How are you feeling about the concept of mindfulness now? Are you thinking this may be something you're willing to give a go? I hope your answer is yes. While most mindfulness-based models of therapy place a major emphasis on meditation, ACT regards it as merely one method among many for developing practical mindfulness skills. Maybe you're breathing a sigh of relief here, because meditating is often something we all know is good for us, but it's challenging to sustain on a regular and long-term basis due to the amount of time it can take. The good news is that there are various ways to practice mindfulness. The choice of method often depends on your personal preference. Here's an overview of some different ways to practice mindfulness. As I mentioned, meditation is one way and often involves sitting quietly and focusing on your breath or a specific point of attention and gently redirecting your focus back to your breath or mantra whenever your mind wanders. Another way to practice mindfulness is to bring intentional present moment, non-judgmental awareness to an activity you're doing, such as walking, running, riding a bike, swimming, or any other ways you like to move your body. You can pay attention to your experience of the activity without letting your mind run through your to-do list or be distracted by music or a podcast. You can pay attention to your internal experience and your external environment as you're engaged in the activity. Another daily activity that you can be mindful of is eating. Oftentimes we are eating on the go or while watching something, reading something, or scrolling through our phone. Mindful eating involves paying attention to each bite of food, including the taste, texture, smell, and colors. Mindful eating can help us be aware of our hunger cues as well as our fullness cues. Journaling is another way to practice mindfulness. Keeping a mindfulness journal involves writing down your thoughts, emotions, and observations without judgment. It can help you become more aware of your inner experiences and patterns of thinking. This doesn't have to take hours. Even 5 minutes daily can be an effective mindfulness practice. Engaging in creative activities like painting, drawing, or playing a musical instrument can also be a form of mindfulness. The focus on the creative process and attunement to the sight, sounds, and experiences allows for a strong connection to various present moment sensations. Another way to practice mindfulness is by incorporating it into your daily routine by setting reminders to pause and be present. For example, you can take a mindful breath every time you receive a message notification on your phone. Of course, there are more formal ways to engage in mindfulness, such as joining a mindfulness group or attending a mindfulness or yoga retreat. These can provide a supportive and immersive environment for deepening your practice. There are also a lot of different guided mindfulness practices, such as body scans, breathing exercises, visualizations, and more. This is probably my most preferred way to practice mindfulness, and I find that for people who are new to mindfulness, the structure of a short guided practice can provide helpful support and troubleshooting. This is by no means an exhaustive list of mindfulness practices. The great thing about mindfulness is that you can bring this practice into almost anything you do on a daily basis, such as eating, showering, walking, working, playing with your kids, talking to a friend, and more. Which means instead of adding a mindfulness practice to your already long list of to-dos, you can bring intentional present moment awareness, curiosity, and non-judgment to the things that you're already doing on a daily basis. It's important to know that mindfulness is a skill that develops over time with regular practice. The key is to try and engage in some form of regular mindfulness practice to build your mindfulness muscle. Just like muscles in our body, the more you train this muscle, the bigger it gets. There is no wrong way to practice mindfulness. Remember, mindfulness is not about having a blank mind. It's normal to experience various thoughts while you're practicing mindfulness. The key is to be aware of your thoughts and to simply notice them as thoughts and then come back to whatever it is you are intentionally being aware of in the moment. Every time you consciously bring yourself back to what you're intentionally focusing on, you're practicing mindfulness. Again, mindfulness is not about having a blank or a clear mind. It's about being intentional about what you want your mind to be focused on in the moment. And another important caveat, mindfulness is not a magic wand that will automatically make things better or easier. And actually, that's not the goal in mindfulness. If you'll recall John Kabat-Zinn's 4-pillar definition, mindfulness is about paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. So this means if you engage in mindful awareness in a difficult time, you're going to be aware of the challenging emotions that may be coming up for you, or the uncomfortable sensations in your body, or the harsh thoughts that your mind is producing. The goal of mindfulness is not to escape pain or seek bliss, but rather be presently attuned to your experience. And although it may be counterintuitive, being presently attuned to your experience, even if it's a challenging one, with non-judgment and curiosity, can actually help us cope with difficulties and move through them. There's a metaphor for emotional processing from Emily Nagoski, an award-winning author. In one of her TED Talks, she discusses the metaphor that emotions are like tunnels and not caves. In other words, we move through emotions, even difficult ones. However, most times, in our efforts to resist or avoid difficult emotions, we actually slow down or prevent moving through the emotional tunnel and instead get stuck in an emotional cave where we either over-identify and get consumed by our emotions, or we avoid and numb ourselves to our emotions. Mindfulness helps us to move through the metaphorical emotional tunnel because this practice encourages us to connect and be aware of our emotions, but not over-identify or get consumed by them. Mindfulness also helps us to not get stuck in avoiding difficult emotions, even though most of us want to do this, as avoidance strategies usually only provide short-term relief and actually tend to keep us trapped in our emotional caves rather than moving through the emotional tunnels. Okay, let's pause here. I've provided a lot of information on mindfulness. Please know that you don't have to fully understand every aspect of mindfulness in one go. Just like anything, learning something new takes time. I always find the best way to learn is to be able to engage with the topic, so that's what we're going to do together. But before I walk us through a short guided mindfulness practice, I want to review some of the struggles people encounter when practicing mindfulness and how to troubleshoot them. First of all, restlessness and impatience. It can be challenging to sit still and focus on the present moment. If you struggle with this, simply acknowledge the desire to move or think and then bring yourself back to the guided practice with the reminder to yourself that the practice is only a few minutes, and then you can get back to whatever it is that needs your attention. Difficulty concentrating. Maintaining focus can be tough as the mind tends to wander. If this happens during the practice, simply acknowledge the thought that has come up and then redirect your attention and awareness back to my voice and back to the practice. Your mind will likely wander a number of times during the practice, so each time it does, simply acknowledge the thought without judgment and bring yourself back to the guided practice. Emotional discomfort. When you pay attention to your thoughts and emotions, you may encounter discomfort or distress. This can be challenging and may motivate you to want to avoid or suppress the difficult emotions. Instead, I invite you to acknowledge the difficult emotions or thoughts by naming them. For example, that sadness or anger is coming up, or I'm having the thought that I don't like myself. Once you've acknowledged the distressing emotion or thought, give yourself a self-compassionate statement such as, "This is really difficult right now," or "Ouch, this hurts," and then bring yourself back to the guided practice. Lack of time. Many of us struggle with finding time for a mindfulness practice amidst busy schedules and daily responsibilities. That's why I encourage people to keep their mindfulness practices short and achievable. The practice I'll be guiding you through today is only a few minutes. So if you made it this far in the video, remind yourself that there's only a few minutes left and make the commitment. Expectations and judgment. We often have preconceived expectations about what mindfulness should feel like or the desire to feel better afterwards. Remind yourself that the goal of mindfulness is to pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Oftentimes, we do feel more relaxed or calm as a result of practicing mindfulness, but these should not be the goals or markers of success when it comes to mindfulness. So now that we've covered some of the challenges and how to navigate them during a mindfulness practice, let's begin together. Before we get started, I invite you to move your body in whatever way feels accessible and comfortable. This is a sedentary practice, so it's nice to get some movement in before we start. Once you've gotten the wiggles out, I invite you to sit on a chair. If you are new to mindfulness practices, I strongly encourage you to do this practice sitting up as opposed to lying down. You can rest your feet flat on the ground as opposed to cross-legged, with your back upright but not rigid. Pull your shoulders back and down, and you can rest your hands on your lap or have them down by your side. I will be guiding you through this practice for about 3 minutes. During the practice, it can be helpful to close your eyes to minimize distractions. If that doesn't feel comfortable, you can find a spot on the floor down in front of you to look at. As we go through this practice together, please know that all instructions are an invitation and not mandatory. Please listen and tend to your own needs. Let's begin. You can close your eyes or lower them to a spot on the floor. I invite you to turn your attention to your breathing. Simply observe the rising and falling of your breath and see if you can notice your breath deep in your belly. There is no need to change your breathing in any way. Just simply allow your breath to go in and out. Next, I invite you to turn your attention to your body. Mentally scan your body and observe any physical sensations. Perhaps you notice the parts of your body that make contact with the chair. Perhaps you notice different temperatures of your body parts. Simply notice any physical sensations you are aware of without judging them as good or bad. In this practice, you will notice that your mind tends to drift off. Please know that that's completely normal. Minds are prone to drifting off towards problem solving, predicting, worrying, planning, judging, and a variety of other activities. When you notice that your mind is doing these things, just gently bring yourself back to the present moment and the instructions I'm providing. You will likely have to do this several times throughout the practice. You will notice your mind wandering towards thinking about something else, and then when you become aware that that's what your mind has done, you'll intentionally bring your attention back to the sound of my voice. I'd like you to begin to imagine yourself sitting next to a stream or river. Perhaps you bring to mind a stream you've been to before, or perhaps you cultivate a stream from your imagination. Take a moment to look around this scene and notice what you see. Maybe you see leaves on the ground, or green trees, or flowers. Next, pay attention to the moving water. Maybe you can even imagine the sound of the stream or river flowing. If your mind is wandering elsewhere, simply notice where it has gone and bring yourself back to your image of the stream. As you sit on the side of the stream, I want you to notice that there are leaves floating on the surface of the water. For now, simply watch these leaves float by. Notice as the leaves float towards your direction and then out of sight as they continue down the moving water. Now, when you become aware of the thought, I want you to imagine placing this thought on one of the leaves floating on the surface of the water. Observe how a leaf floats close towards you and imagine yourself placing the thought on this leaf, and then simply watch as the leaf holds your thought and notice it gently float down the stream. Return to gazing at the stream, and as you do this, notice another leaf floating towards you. Continue with this practice of imagining yourself placing another thought, or perhaps the same thought has come up again, onto the leaf, and then watch as it drifts off down the stream. You can continue this practice of imagining yourself placing the thoughts that come to your mind on separate leaves and watching them float down the stream one by one. If you notice that your thoughts are coming quickly, try to slow down and acknowledge each thought at a time and intentionally place one thought on one leaf and watch it float down the stream. Again, you may notice the same thought coming up, or you may notice different thoughts. Whatever the case, simply continue placing each thought on a leaf and watch it float away. If you like, you can allow yourself to take the perspective of the stream. As you imagine yourself taking the perspective of the stream, notice how you hold all the leaves floating down, each one carrying a thought. As a stream, you don't need to interfere with the leaves. You can let them do what they are naturally doing, floating. Notice what it's like to take this perspective of observing your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream. Now, as we move to wrapping up this practice together, I'd like to invite you to gradually widen your attention to the surroundings beyond the stream. Notice what you see, hear, and smell in this scene. Take in these surroundings and know that you can bring yourself back to this place anytime you'd like to engage in this mindfulness practice. Before opening your eyes, I invite you to take a moment to see if you can bring the intention of observation as well as gentle allowing from this practice into the present moment. This means resisting the urge to judge your thoughts or experiences, as well as not necessarily interfering with your thoughts and experiences, simply noticing them as they are. This may seem challenging, especially if this is new to you. That's okay. Just tap into gaining perspective and being curious. As we move to closing this practice, bring your awareness back to your breath, knowing that you've been breathing this whole time, and now you can take a moment to bring awareness to this sensation. Perhaps you may want to push your feet into the floor or stretch or move your body. And if you haven't already, you can open your eyes. Welcome back. I'd like to congratulate you on being willing to practice this mindfulness exercise together. No matter what your experience was, you successfully practiced mindfulness. You were intentional about what you were paying attention to in a curious and non-judgmental manner. Even if your mind drifted away from the practice or you struggled to stay with the practice, your effort to engage in this practice is the practice of mindfulness. Let's debrief this mindfulness practice together. What are you aware of right now? Do you notice any particular emotions, physical sensations, or thoughts? Do you feel any differently now compared to before the practice? Maybe you feel more calm or grounded. If so, that's great. But remember, that's not necessarily the purpose of mindfulness. The purpose of mindfulness is to pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. The thing is, when we do this, we do often feel more calm as a result. Maybe you feel confused or uncertain. That's okay. Just see if you can be aware of your current experience, whatever it may be. What did you notice during this practice? Maybe you were able to notice the sensation of breathing. Maybe you were able to notice being aware of your thoughts and imagining them on leaves floating down the stream. Perhaps you noticed how difficult this exercise is and how quickly your mind moves around to different cognitive tasks. What did you struggle with in this practice? Maybe you found the sound of my voice irritating, or maybe you had a difficult time visualizing the stream. Maybe your thoughts were coming so quickly that it was difficult to slow down and place one thought at a time on a leaf. What did you notice when you shifted your perspective from observing the leaves on the stream to taking the perspective of the stream itself? This ability to tap into an observing stance is a fundamental feature of mindfulness. It allows us to zoom out when we may be feeling overwhelmed or consumed by what's happening in the moment and recognize that there's a part of ourselves that can simply observe our experience. This ability to observe can be helpful, particularly when we are feeling anxious. When we are anxious, we tend to become hyper aware of things. So if we can take the perspective of observing our experience without over identifying with it, we can feel more able to cope with our distress. Well, that wraps up this mindfulness practice. Thanks again for being willing to engage in this practice with me, especially if this was your first time practicing mindfulness. In this episode of Navigating Your Mental Health Compass, we focused on the present moment. This concept is also known as mindfulness, and it is one of the core processes of acceptance and commitment therapy. Mindfulness is such a big topic, and I hope I was able to break it down for you in this episode to help you better understand what it is, why it helps, and how you can bring daily mindfulness practices into your life. Just a reminder that mindfulness isn't a magic wand that provides instant relief. Mindfulness is a continual practice. We don't often experience the benefits of mindfulness until we engage with it on a regular basis. Let's wrap up with revisiting the compass metaphor. The compass metaphor is a visual representation used to illustrate the main core processes in ACT. In this episode, we focused on the compass needle, which represents being present in the moment. In ACT, mindfulness and present moment awareness are crucial. The needle reminds us to stay focused on the here and now, as that's where we make choices and take actions that align with our values. Mindfulness helps us to stay true to the direction we want to travel in, north, in alignment with our values. Up next is episode 3, Accepting What Is Out of Your Control, in which I provide an overview of acceptance, which is a strategy that can help us stay moving north in alignment with our values, even when challenges want to pull us south. Acceptance is another of ACT's core processes for helping us move towards psychological flexibility and living a life in alignment with our values. Once again, I'm Sarah. Thanks so much for joining me in this second episode of Discovering Your Mental Health Compass. Please be sure to check out all the videos a part of the Navigating Your Mental Health Compass series on YouTube.